She's one of the most vocal members of Congress. She's spoken out against corruption. She's called for others to resign. But now, the spotlight is on her. The story of Maxine Waters is no longer just about fiery speeches and political resistance. It's about what happened behind the scenes in her own campaign. In 2020, during one of the most contested election years in recent memory, Maxine Waters' campaign, officially registered as Citizens for Waters, was flagged by the Federal Election Commission. What started as a standard compliance check quickly escalated into a full-scale investigation. After months of analysis and internal review, the FEC concluded that Waters' campaign had committed multiple violations of federal election law. These were not isolated errors. They were systemic, repeated, serious enough that the commission ruled against the campaign. The punishment: a $68,000 fine and mandatory campaign finance training for the campaign's treasurer. For a sitting member of Congress, especially one who spent years accusing others of impropriety, this wasn't just a fine, it was a major political blow. The FEC documents, made public in 2023, revealed that the violations included misreporting of funds, misallocated contributions, and improper filing of donor records. But the scandal didn't end there. What drew even more attention was a separate report, this one detailing nearly $200,000 in payments from Maxine Waters' campaign to her own daughter. These payments were tied to a long-criticized practice known as a slate mailer operation, where campaign literature is mailed under a politician's endorsement, often benefiting family members financially. Critics called it political nepotism. Her allies called it business as usual. Maxine Waters' team dismissed the violations as clerical mistakes, nothing more. But according to FEC investigators, the scope and frequency of the errors told a different story. Still, rather than fight the case in court, the campaign settled. That move may have spared her more legal scrutiny, but it didn't stop the questions. It didn't erase the documents. And it didn't silence her critics. As public interest in the case grew, attention turned sharply to one name mentioned repeatedly in the documents: Karen Waters, Maxine Waters' daughter. Over the span of multiple election cycles, Karen had received nearly $1.2 million from her mother's campaign. But it was the most recent $200,000 payout that drew the strongest backlash, especially amid ongoing questions about transparency and accountability. The payments were tied to organizing slate mailers, political endorsements, packaged as campaign literature, a practice legal in California but rarely used elsewhere due to its ethical gray area. Many critics saw this as an example of political privilege being passed from mother to daughter, shielded by influence and name recognition. For years, Maxine Waters had been one of the loudest voices accusing others, particularly political opponents, of corruption, dishonesty, and misuse of power. She had called for investigations into sitting presidents, demanded resignations over conflicts of interest, and positioned herself as a defender of ethics in public life. But now, she was the one on the receiving end of those same allegations. The public narrative had flipped, and to some, the contrast was too stark to ignore. Media coverage amplified the controversy. Outlets across the political spectrum highlighted the settlement and the family payments. Conservative voices were quick to call it hypocrisy. Liberal commentators were more reserved, but even some allies quietly questioned the optics. Was this truly just a technical error, as Waters' team claimed? Or had she crossed the line she once condemned in others? Despite the scrutiny, there were no criminal charges and no admission of wrongdoing beyond the FEC agreement. Maxine Waters remained defiant, continuing to speak forcefully in interviews, dismissing the backlash as politically motivated. But the damage was already done. For many voters, especially independents, the story left a lasting impression. The message was simple: even those who shout the loudest against corruption can be caught in it themselves. The fallout was immediate, but not explosive. Maxine Waters did not resign. She did not face criminal charges. She did not apologize. But public confidence shifted. While her supporters remained loyal, the scandal became a talking point across political circles, a symbol of how power can blur the lines between ethics and entitlement. For critics, it wasn't just about fines or money. It was about trust, about holding leaders to the same standards they demand of others. In the weeks following the FEC ruling, Waters continued her public appearances. She gave interviews, she doubled down on her positions, and she refused to engage directly with the deeper accusations. To some, it was strength. To others, deflection. For many voters, it left an uncomfortable question lingering. If one of the most outspoken voices in Congress can quietly settle such serious violations, what does that say about the system as a whole? Across social media, reactions were divided. Supporters praised her decades of service and dismissed the scandal as political targeting. Others, including independent voters and watchdog groups, called for tighter enforcement of campaign finance laws. The conversation turned away from Waters herself and toward a wider issue. How often do elected officials misuse power without consequence? This story is not just about one politician. It's about what happens when public accountability meets private protection. It's about how political influence can shield even the most vocal advocates from full responsibility. And it's about what the public deserves, not just in speeches, but in actions. Maxine Waters remains in office. Her legacy, like many in Washington, is now a mix of advocacy and controversy. But the facts remain on record. The fines have been paid. The headlines have faded. And the questions are still waiting for answers.